Okay, so we're doing 5.5 day 2, and then by the end of today you'll be able to solve inequalities using algebra. So let's look at the directions for example 1. So solve the inequality algebraically. Now for your homework questions, some of the directions might be a little bit different, but I want you to do all of them with these directions. Okay, because there is more than one way to solve this. You can also use like a graph and a table. But we're just going to do the algebraic method. Okay, so example 1, solve the inequality algebraically. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the LCD. Okay, so your least common denominator. You only have one part that is the denominator, and that's going to be x minus 8. So x minus 8 is going to be your LCD. Now, if this is my LCD, do I know if x is positive or negative? Right now, do I know? No. Okay, so since x is unknown, we don't know if the LCD is positive or negative. Okay, so what value would make this positive? Tell me any value. 2 would actually make it what?
10. 9.
Okay, so 10 would make it positive, 9 would make it positive, 10 minus 8 would be 2, 9 minus 8 would be 1. Anything that's larger than what? 8. Okay, anything that is less than 8 would make this what? Negative. Do you guys know why that matters with inequalities, whether or not it's positive or negative? Is there a special property that you guys remember with inequalities and positives and negatives?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you. So if you have an inequality, if you divide by a negative or if you multiply by a negative, do you remember what happens? No? Yeah, you have to flip the sign. Okay, so you have to flip the sign. So that's why it's important that we know if it is positive or negative. So for the first case, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that the LCD is positive. So that's why we have to do 2 cases. Okay? So for case 1, we're going to assume the LCD is positive. We're going to solve for x. Now I want you to know that the first time we go through this, you're going to think it takes a long time, but as we keep practicing, you're going to see some patterns, and you're actually going to end up doing less work once you see what those patterns are. So when you're solving for x and you have a fraction, okay, if you have a fraction, then what do I multiply by? Good, okay, so multiply by the denominator. So I'm going to multiply each side. Joe, what am I going to multiply each side by? Okay, good, x minus 8. So if I multiply each side by x minus 8, okay, then those will cancel out, and then I'll get 6. Now, Alex Dale, can you tell me what I'll get on this side if I do 3 times x minus 8?
Oh, I guess yeah. 3x minus 24.
Good. And you did a really nice job of making sure that you distribute. So you do have to make sure you distribute that 3 to both of them. Okay, so now I have to get x by itself. So, Timmy, what am I going to do next?
You're gonna add 24.
Good. Okay, so I'm going to add 24 to both sides. So I have 30 is less than or equal to 3x. Grace, what do I do after that? Nope. Because you said don't divide by the x because the x you want to keep there. So you have, let's read this together. So 10 is what? Okay, good. 10 is less than or equal to x. Another way that you could write that.
X is greater than or equal to 10.
Yes, good. Okay, so this is the same thing as x is greater than or equal to 10. The way that I check it to make sure that I wrote this correctly is, do you guys think of like the alligator? Do you guys remember that? The alligator eats the bigger one. So with this one, see how the sign is gonna be eating the X?
Yeah.
Nom nom nom. Okay, so here it still is gonna be eating the X, okay? So it's still open towards the X. Okay, so this is gonna be part of our answer. Now, in the case where the LCD is positive, you're also going to set up another inequality. And that's if we know that the LCD is positive, we can say that the x minus 8 is greater than 0. Okay, so step 2, what we're going to do is consider the sign of the LCD. Which in this case, remember we said the LCD was positive. So we can write is greater than 0 because if it's greater than 0, doesn't that mean it's a positive number? So if it was 0 or less than, it would be negative. If it's greater than 0, it's a positive number. So we're going to solve this for x. Yep, so you'd add 8 to both sides. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to assess our solution here. Okay, so for step 3, the solution must be both greater than 8 and greater than or equal to 10. So I want you to think about that for a second. The solution has to be both greater than 8 and greater than or equal to 10. Do you guys know what that would simplify to? Right away. Okay, so then I'm going to show you with a number line because I think it's really nice to see them with a number line. Okay, so for this one, on my number line, I'm going to put 8 and 10. Do you guys remember from Algebra 1 how you can graph these? So if you're graphing x is greater than or equal to 10, you would have an open circle or a closed circle. Do you guys know? Closed. Why? Taylor, tell me why. Yeah, okay, if it's equal to, it includes it. So if x is greater than or equal to 10, this would be the graph, right? If x is greater than 8, am I going to have an open circle or a closed circle? Open. And then it's greater than, so if it's greater than, it's going to the right. And that line is x is greater than 8. And then what you have to do is find where they overlap. So what I do is I just color in where they overlap. So the simplified equation is where they overlap. And they overlap starting at 10 and going all the way to where? Keep going. Infinity. Good. Okay, so then it'll be x is greater than or equal to 10. Okay, so I'm going to say this simplifies to x is greater than or equal to 10. Okay, now that is just for case 1. So that took kind of a long time to explain. So now we're going to do case 2 where the LCD is negative. And this is the part where I told you this is going to take us a little bit at first. But once you start to see the patterns, you're not going to have to do all this work all the time. So step 1 is still the same. You're going to solve for x. Okay, and we've actually already done that. So if we do 6 over x minus 8 is less than or equal to 3, do we already know what our solution's going to be? Yeah, and for this one, this one is going to be very similar, but there's going to be one change. So we're going to multiply by x minus 8. So you're going to get 6 is less than or equal to 3x minus 24. But the sign is not going to be the same. What happens when you multiply by a negative? It flips. Okay, so we're going to write a little note there. So the sign changes. I'll put flips. When you multiply by a negative. So what was the negative that I multiplied by? Yep, the denominator, right? The LCD. So for case 2, your LCD is negative. Our LCD is what? X minus 8. So when I multiply by negative 8, I'm multiplying by a negative number. So then the sign's going to flip. So if I keep going and I add 24, I'll have 30 is greater than or equal to 3x. Divide by 3. I'll have 10 is greater than or equal to x. And then I can flip this around. So x is less than or equal to 10. So look at your two-step ones. What's the only difference between the two-step ones? The signs are flipped. Okay, so the first time we wrote it out so that you could see what's going to happen. But from now on, if you guys just want to follow the pattern, you know it's going to be the same thing, but the sign is going to flip, you can just do that. Okay, so I'm just going to write notice, this is the same as step 1 in the positive case, except the signs are flipped. Okay, and then for step 2, just like we did before, we're going to consider the sign. Okay, so this time it's going to be negative. So x minus 8 is not going to be greater than 0, it's going to be what? Less than 0. So now I'm going to solve this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to find a solution has to be less than or equal to 10 and less than 8. So I know some of you are going to be able to look at that and realize which one it is, but if you need more of a visual representation, what can we do with both of them?
That one line.
Yeah, we're going to graph it on the number line. Okay, so then if we graph it on the number line, again, I'm just going to put my 8 and my 10. Okay, so Hunter, am I going to have an open circle or a closed circle for x is less than or equal to 10? If it's equal to, right? What does that line on the bottom mean? Yeah, it's going to be closed, right? So if it's a less than, am I going to the left or am I going to the right? Left. Okay, for x is less than 8, and now I have an open circle, I'm going to the left. I'm going to find my overlap. Do you guys think you already know what your overlap equation is? Good, x is less than 8. Okay, so then there's one more step, and that's your final solution. So once you find both of the solutions, this is for case 1 solution. This is case 2 solution. Now we're going to find the solution of the entire thing. Okay, so if we have a number that's greater than or equal to 10 and a number that's that x is less than 8, can that happen at the same time? Can a number be greater than or equal to 10 and less than 8? No. Okay, so then our solution is going to be the combination of both of them. Okay, so since a number x cannot be greater than or equal to 10 and less than 8 at the same time, our solution is x is less than 8 or x is greater than or equal to 10. Okay, so this is your final solution. Okay, and for these, you can also find the overlap. If there's no overlap, you're just going to connect them with or. Okay, and we'll go over that as well. Okay, so let's try the next one. You guys are doing a good job. Okay, so for B, we have 6 over x minus 2, and that's greater than or equal to negative 4. Okay, so for your first step, you are going to write down the LCD. And Kylie, can you tell me what your LCD is for this one? Great. Okay, so your LCD is x minus 2. So let's do case 1. And you guys can like split down your paper if you want to. Like, so you have your case 1, case 2. So we're going to do case 1, and that's the positive. Actually, I'll highlight that so it kind of stands out. Okay, so case 1, if it is positive, remember we're just going to solve. And so, Arandi, when you're solving and you have a fraction, what do you do first? Very good. Okay, so you're going to multiply it by our LCD, which is x minus 2. And then here, x minus 2 divided by x minus 2 is going to cancel out. Remember, this is like over 1. So see how those one's on the top, one's on the bottom? That's why they cancel out. So then, Gabe, what am I left with on this side? Okay, and then what about my next side? Okay, good, and then we're going to solve for x. So when you're solving for x, you want to move all of your numbers to one side. Okay, and then, Joe, what would I do from here? Yes, and then, what happens when you divide by a negative? What do you have to do with the sign? Flip it. Flip it good. Do you guys know that song, Whip It?
No.
Whip it. Whip it good. Let's whip it. Oh, that's another good song. Okay, so we're going to flip the sign because we divided by a negative, Okay, that's why we did it. So for this, we have x is greater than or equal to 1/2. So that's step 1. And then for step 2, Kaylin, what do we do for step 2? Yep, so do you know what my equation is going to be? So you're going to take your LCD and you're,
Minus 2 is, x minus 2 is greater than 0?
yeah, good, because it's positive, right? So we'll actually write that here, and if you want to write it above as well, you're always going to take your LCD and set that greater than 0. So then if I were to solve, I'd add 2 to both sides, and I'd get x is greater than 2. Or not 2. Oh yeah, 2 for this, sorry. I was looking at the 1/2. Okay, so now what we have to do for the third step is find the overlap. So for the third step, I have 2 and I have 1/2. So if it's a number line, do you guys know what number always goes first on the number line? Yeah, the smaller one. So x is greater than or equal to 1/2. X is also greater than 2. So here's their overlapping. So what equation am I going to use? Yeah, x is greater than 2. Do you guys see how this represents the x is greater than 2? So this is your case 1 solution. Okay, now we're going to do our case 2. So for case 2, Petrova, this is when the LCD is what? So for case 1, the LCD is positive. For case 2, the LCD is what? Negative. Okay, so do you guys remember the pattern that we saw for the first one? You're just going to flip the sign. So for step 1, see how we got x is greater than or equal to 1/2? So for this one, we know x is what? Less than or equal to 1/2. Okay, so flip sign from step 1. Okay, and I'm writing these little notes for you, and you should be writing them as well, so that when you look back, you aren't just seeing the numbers, but you're seeing, oh, why did we do that? Well, because we took the equation from step 1 and we flipped the sign. Then for step 2, this is where you're going to set the LCD is less than 0, because the LCD in this case is what? If it's less than 0, it's going to be what? Negative. Okay, so then I'm going to have x is less than 2. So here are my 2 equations. For step 3, Risha, for step 3, what am I trying to do? What am I trying to find? Yep, and what? So if I graph them on a number line, what am I looking for? But what's going to happen with the 2 graphs? You're going to look for where they're going to overlap. Yeah, so both of these actually do go the same way. So x is less than 2, or x is less than or equal to 1/2. So look and see where they overlap, and that'll tell you what your solution is. So your equation from this, can you guys see what your equation is going to be? Is this the x is less than or equal to 1/2, or the x is greater than 2 that's overlapped? Yeah, the 1/2, right? Because see how it starts at 1/2 and it goes to negative infinity. Okay, and then for your final solution, you want to ask yourself, can a number be greater than 2 and less than or equal to 1/2 at the same time? Okay, can a number be greater than 2 and less than equal to 1/2? can't think of any numbers that are gonna be greater than 2 and less than or equal to 1/2. Okay, so if the answer is no, then you're gonna have two equations. So x is less than or equal to 1/2, or x is greater than 2. Okay, so if you were to graph this, there would be no overlap on the number line. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, so for C, you're gonna do 9 over x plus 3 is less than 6. Okay, and I'm gonna give you some time to do both of your cases.